morning, everybody. Welcome to Zoom at 8. My name is Julianne Peterson, and I am your host every Tuesday night for Zoom at 8. I'm a loan officer for Old Capital Lending, and we are a premier provider of debt. What does that mean? We provide loans, bank, bridge, agency. I can help you with the gap funding once we get Ethan on board, some private equity, hard money, all of that. You can come to Old Capital and we can help you. Now, we are specialists in multifamily, but we will do other asset classes, mobile home parks, retail, storage, industrial, any of those. If you're working on something like that, we could be your provider of the debt. Now, again, if you're working on something, I would like the opportunity to win and get your approval to be your local lender or your local provider, your lender of choice. So if you're working on something, please provide me with your T12, your rent roll, the offering memorandum, and your underwriting. All of that, package it up, give it to me, send it over to my email, and we will underwrite it. You want to know before you put in an LOI, where do I need to be priced? What is the lending piece of this? I've done an underwriting recently where someone came in $1 million over asking. He didn't know. So when the loan came in, the proceeds were very low and he put himself at risk. So check in first. We'll help you in any way we can. All right. So tonight I'm very excited. We've got somebody who has been here before, Keith Weinhold. He's going to be showing up here shortly. We've had him before. He's a big educator in commercial real estate. So we'll get to him in just a minute. But if you're new here and you don't know how to network, you're kind of shy, you don't want to go and spend a bunch of money to go to a conference, you can do it here every Tuesday night. We ask you to put your information in the chat, tell us a little bit about yourself. We want to get to know you. We have closed $200 million in this room. Whether you're a sponsor, whether you are an investor, or you're a vendor, everybody can benefit from being here. I'm very excited to introduce those new people who've never met with Keith Weinhold. He was here a couple of years ago and he said yes, and here he is. He is our industry expert for tonight on this live conversation. So Keith is an amazing speaker. He has created and hosts one of America's top investing shows called the Get Rich Education Podcast with 5 million listener downloads to date. He has 21 years of experience directly investing in income producing property. It all began in Anchorage, Alaska. When he bought a fourplex. He lived in one and rented the other 3. And since 2002, Keith has owned income producing real estate in the United States and Latin America, and he is primarily a buy and hold investor for cash flow, what we all are looking and seeking. He focuses on following key principles of financial education and real estate literacy. In fact, he authored the international best-selling book, 7 Money Myths That Are Killing Your Wealth Potential. Write that down, everybody. 7 money myths that are killing your wealth potential. Keith has served on the Forbes Real Estate Council since 2017. He's originally from Pennsylvania. Keith and his wife, beautiful wife, my goodness, they remain in Alaska, where Keith excels at competing in some monster mountain trail running competitions. This guy is amazing. So it is, again, my great pleasure to welcome back Keith Weinhold. Welcome to Zoom at 8.
Oh, it's great to be back, Julie. Thanks for that really warm introduction. Yeah, I was last here in 2021. That's the first time I was here. This is the second time. So here I am 2 years older, and I don't know if I'm any wiser. We'll see about that.
But you're much, much fitter than the last time, although you were pretty fit 2 years ago. So I'm excited that you're here. I mean, a lot of things have happened since you were here last. I don't think we were able to really talk about anything negative that was going on 2 years ago.
You're right. That was the period of the housing market frenzy in 2021. January of 2021 is when mortgage rates hit their all-time low of 2.65%. Yes, we're in such a different place now. And yeah, I really like these chats, Julie. I really wanted to come back because, one nice thing that you do here is that, this often feels like more of a conversation rather than a presentation is the feel you give here. So I only have one image. So it's not a PowerPoint presentation. I'll only have one image if we'll get to that. And that's because what I talk about is so unbelievable that you need to see an image to believe what I'm talking about. In fact, I expect you to hear some things about real estate that you've never heard before and that you've never expected to hear. And in a sense, it's like, well, why would you show up to only hear what you would expect? That would be pretty boring. So like Julie said, my name is Keith Weinhold. I'm the founder of Get Rich Education. That's what the GRE is for here on my microphone flag. And this is the same microphone I do the Get Rich Education podcast from every week as well. I've served on the Forbes Real Estate Council for 6 years and write articles for Forbes. And I am a 21-year real estate investor, not a 21-year-old real estate investor, a 21-year real estate investor since I bought that first fourplex building that Julie discussed. So we'll see what I've got today. We'll see if I can outdo Apple's iPhone 15 announcement. I don't know about that. I don't know if I can be more interesting than that. We'll see what I can do. I've got, like I said, one image to share and one dorky prop to share with you. And yes, I do indeed live in a pretty unusual place, even though I'm an active investor in the United States from Alaska to Florida. And even outside the United States. It was great to listen to some of your stories while I was waiting to begin. It sounds like we have mostly a United States-based audience here with a really good mix of both beginners and advanced investors. So I like hearing that. But yeah, I began in Anchorage, Alaska. My first ever home of any kind was that aforementioned fourplex building, a $295,000 fourplex, where I lived in one unit and rented out the other three. I just worked a normal, boring day job doing construction materials testing. I didn't have much money. And I learned that you didn't need much. I learned a couple friends had bought a fourplex building with just a 3.5% down payment, lived in one unit and rented out the other three. That's still a very actionable thing that anyone can do today. You can buy a single family home, duplex, triplex, or fourplex. Fourplex is as big as you can go with just a 3.5% down payment, minimum 580 credit score. The higher the credit score, the lower the interest rate. And then thirdly, you need to live in one of the units for at least 12 months. Very actionable, great way to start with a bang. That's how I got going. And I really learned some important lessons from that fourplex that I think maybe some longtime real estate investors don't even put together. I learned I don't want to focus on getting my money to work for me. You heard that correctly. I don't want to focus on getting my money to work for me. That sounds more like a long-term compound interest 401k sort of strategy. Taking a page out of the Rich Dad book, I used to write for the Rich Dad Advisors, I want to get other people's money to work for me. That's how wealth is built. If I just get my money to work for me with kind of a conventional strategy in mutual funds, mutual fund returns are worn down by inflation, emotion, taxes, fees, and volatility. So I want to get over here in the other people's money camp. And with this fourplex, like I just described, are really how you, even the syndicator, would buy a big building. You're using other people's money 3 ways at the same time, and you're doing it ethically to provide others with good housing. You're using the tenant's money for the rent income and to control the mortgage. Secondly, you're using the bank's money for the loan. With that 3.5% down payment on a fourplex, I was getting 96.5% from the bank. And then thirdly, I'm using the government's money for very generous tax incentives, including never having to pay capital gains tax. So what are the lessons I learned from that first building that I still carry with me today, where now I buy, larger, more expensive apartment buildings, is I'm using other people's money 3 ways at the same time. And if you're a syndicator trying to educate, potential limited partners in your deal, that might be one framework for breaking it down, where they really understand how you're able to reliably deliver outsized returns. It's tapping in to other people's money. So I grew into larger apartment buildings in Anchorage and started investing out of state. My first out of state property was in the Dallas Fort Worth area, just a turnkey rental, which really wasn't a good one. I just fell into the oh, it's a beautiful brick home for only 153K. I'll just buy it because it's cheap. Well, it didn't work out all that great for me. It didn't go too badly either, but it's important to be invested in multiple markets for diversification. I think Julie touched on that a little bit earlier. So importantly, a big lesson I learned is that when it comes to real estate investing, the property is only the fourth most important thing. And most people put it first. Some people come to me for guidance. They want to grow their portfolio. They want to get into real estate. They get really excited about a property. And I have to tell people, you know what? Stop looking at properties. And if you like, Julie, I can go into why I often have to tell people, just stop looking at properties. This has to do with the point where we talk about real estate markets, Julie.
I would love to hear that because that is not what we typically hear. Stop, right? Everybody says, let's go. Tell us a little, can you break that down for us?
Yeah, how in the heck is property only the fourth most important thing in real estate investing? The most important thing is you. What do you want real estate to do for you? You're at the top of this hierarchy. Are you looking for appreciation or cash flow? Or are you looking for tax benefits? You're just looking for a lifestyle investment like a nice beach house where you and your family can hang out at. What do you want real estate to do for you? You need to get clear on that first. And then secondly, is the market. We can think of market in a few different ways, residential, industrial, and all that, but I think a lot of people think of geography. What market do you want to be in? And really, what market do you want to avoid? This second most important thing in the hierarchy of what makes a successful strategic real estate investor is the market. In my 21 years of experience, there is more risk in buying what seems like a nice property in a little hodunk town of 8,000 people out in the middle of nowhere where 40% of that town's employment is tied to the tungsten mine. Well, if you're going to have a residential or commercial property, you know, your fortunes now float on what's going on with the tungsten mine and what the price of tungsten is, because you're buying a property to keep it filled with rent-paying tenants. You've got a lot of risk now being in a small market. So I like to be in the bigger metros, an MSA of at least 500,000 to 1 million people that has employment in durable sectors, like long-term durable sectors like technology and medical that just continue to be expanding. Your tenant pays you rent income. They get that rent income for a job. So those are durable drivers in a market. That's second most important thing. And then the third most important thing, still more important than the property, is that team of professionals that you choose to surround yourself with. That could be anyone from your 1031 exchange qualified intermediary to your mortgage loan officer to that all-important property manager. I don't manage any of my own properties. Even when I own them in Anchorage, I sure don't manage them across state lines. The manager is the glue that makes this stick together. That's the team. And then fourthly, and only fourthly, is the property. Okay, now what do most people do? A lot of people have a bad real estate investing experience. Perhaps even most people have a bad real estate investing experience because what do? Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, they go 4, 3, 2, 1. Mm-hmm. They start with the property and that might get emotions behind it. For example, if you commute to work, you know, your friend might commute to work and maybe they see this duplex building that they always admired. They think it's got great paint and nice landscaping and pretty shutters. And one day there's a for sale sign on it. And they always heard that real estate was a good thing to invest in. And they keep seeing this twice a day on their commute. They've kind of got emotions behind it. Well, they buy it because they see that it's filled with rent-paying tenants. Well, they led with emotion. And they led with something very arbitrary. They just happened to drive by it, not very strategic. So what do? They buy that property. It might work out, but what happens after they buy that property, which is only the fourth most important thing? Soon they learn they don't like managing it. They don't like having tenants that can text them at any time. So then they go out and try to find if there's a good manager in that market. The third most important thing, now it's too late. Now you're at the mercy of hoping there's a good manager in that market. And then secondly, they go up and try to figure out the market itself. And, oh, is there job contraction in this market? Or I really didn't even think of that. And then they go back to number one. Oh, does this property even do what I wanted it to do for me? I thought it was going to provide positive cash flow, but it doesn't, because I got emotional and I began with the property. So this is why I tell people, stop looking at properties, pull back, get strategic. It's only the fourth most important thing. Finally, to review, the most important thing is you. Second is the market. Third is the team. And then fourthly, and only fourthly, is the property. That's simple. That's strategic. It's easy to remember. And now you're really setting yourself up for success.
That is fantastic. I was on a group and they were asking for suggestions. And somebody says, "Oh no, start looking at properties." I mean, that is amazing input. Most people do not look at it that way. That's fantastic.
Well, I got it wrong in the beginning. When I bought that fourplex building, it just happened to be in my hometown. And I actually got kind of lucky. The Anchorage economy was expanding at that time. So there was a little bit of luck in this. Had the Anchorage economy contracted, maybe I would have sold it, had a terrible experience. And Julie, you never would have heard of me then if that would have happened. So this is a lesson that I learned over time. And this is why last year, I sold my last Alaska apartment building. It's the first time in more than 20 years, Julie. I'm not even sure if you know this yet.
I didn't know you sold it, but you were
Yeah.
wondering what you were going to do 2 years ago. You were thinking
Right.
about it.
Right. It's the first time in more than 20 years that I have not owned Anchorage income property. And why is that? Because the Anchorage economy is lousy. We're losing population. We're losing jobs. Our gross domestic output is contracting. And again, the market's more important than the property. The market's the second most important thing. The property is only fourth. So I owned local apartment buildings that I held for about 8 years. They stayed well occupied because, like most everywhere in America, we have a housing shortage, but the rents didn't go up because the economy is not expanding. So my expenses went up, the rents didn't, they weren't very profitable. And I need to practice what I preach and not be emotional just because they happen to be in my town. And I traded up into those buildings because there are some good local financing options that I couldn't get out of state. But this poorly diversified market, much like the fictitious market I talked about of 8,000 people with the tungsten mine, this is a poorly diversified market. Anchorage, Alaska's market is very dependent on what happens in the oil industry, and oil throughput is down. We're a poorly diversified economy. So this is an example that you can extrapolate out to the way you break down markets as you go. Typically, the bigger the market, the safer you are. Safety is not my favorite word in investing, actually, but it is pretty important in this case. And actually, there's a little lesson from when I sold those 2 Anchorage apartment buildings. I had 10-year balloon loans on those. You may not know what a balloon loan is, especially if you're new to real estate investing. Actually, it is an apropos moniker, balloon loan. It's actually an appropriate name for what the thing is, because though both buildings were on 30-year amortizations, meaning the payments were spread out like I would make monthly payments for 30 years, 10 years into that 30-year period, the entire principal balance is due in full. Now, why would I choose a balloon loan over a 30-year long loan, 30 years of certainty? Because with a balloon loan, a 10-year balloon loan, I could get an interest rate about 3/8% lower. If I would have gone with a 7-year balloon loan, okay, making things even riskier, at 7 years, I need to fully pay that thing off. I could have gotten an even lower interest rate. But in my experience, pretty much any 10-year slice in the market on a nominal basis, it's very difficult for prices to go down. So if you ever get a balloon loan like I had here, what happens as you approach that 10-year mark? You've really got 3 choices in what to do with your balloon loan when that entire thing comes due. You can sell, you can keep it and hope that you can refinance, Or you could do about the least likely thing, keep it and pay it off yourself with cash, like 7 figures cash, which not a lot of people have hanging around. So I opted for the first one, to sell those buildings that were on a balloon loan. But now you understand a bit more about the market. Now you know what balloon loans are. And I don't know if you've ever been to Anchorage. It's actually a very interesting place to live. It used to have a population of 300,000. Now it only has a population of 290,000. We have the 5th busiest cargo airport in the entire world in Anchorage, and second in the nation to Memphis. We have high-rise buildings, convention centers, gangs, and rappers. We have all those things in Anchorage, so it's like a real city. But
That's
I no
wild.
longer have income property here.
So I'm going to ask the question. What did you do with the capital that you got from those sales? Did you 1031? What did you do? Did you go? You obviously went out of state. So where did you go?
Yes, I 1031 a lot of it. And where I've been doing a lot of my buying, Julie, is in Florida. That's now getting more challenged as Florida prices have run up quite a bit more than they have in some other places. But Florida is where I'm heavily invested. Actually, this is the first time one of the properties I did not do a 1031 exchange on. For those that don't know, the tax code gives you the opportunity to do a 1031 exchange if you're a real estate investor, where you can legally defer capital gains tax your entire life and never have to pay it. So I did the 1031 exchange on one of the buildings. On the other buildings, again, it didn't appreciate much over 8 years because of a sagging market. I actually didn't do a 1031 exchange, and I kind of regret it. It kind of hurt me. I had to pay the capital gains tax, and you also have to pay back the depreciation recapture, all the depreciation you've been writing off every year. So I actually got the experience of not doing a 1031 for the first time. But yes, otherwise, Julie, it's in that southeastern quadrant of the United States is really where I favored, especially Florida.
Well, I would say that for our next interview, we'd love to go through that, that pain of not doing the 1031. And I mean, it's a challenge, right? If you don't do it, here's the reasons, that you get hit with. So that's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that, but I want to hear, Keith, about inflation
Yeah,
because we are really we've been worried over the last 18 months, right, about inflation. And we really weren't looking at it too hard. We've got economists that have not, they call themselves economists that have not really lived in this economic issues, right? It happened before they were even old enough to know about inflation. So
right.
tell us about your thoughts on inflation and how they affect, buying real estate. Right now, it's expensive to buy properties. They're coming down, right? Because of the interest rate. So talk to us about a little bit about that in your view on inflation.
Inflation is defined as an expansion in the money supply. Most people think it's prices going up, but prices going up is really just a symptom of an expansion in the money supply.
Mhm.
And I think an important word, Julie, is noticeable. When CPI inflation is near the Fed's 2% target, that's not very noticeable. It's really not much of a thing. And here the dorky prop is about to enter, okay, when it comes to inflation. Okay, check this out. I purchased this in Anchorage, and Anchorage prices aren't that much higher than they are in the rest of the United States. We have a big port here in Anchorage. I purchased this, and there's quite a lesson from this right here. And you might be thinking, what is this? This looks like a bottle of salad dressing. Okay, yes, it is a bottle of salad dressing, and I pay $8.79 for this now. I'm a pretty healthy spender, but this even gave me some pause. $8.79 for this is just a 12-ounce bottle of salad dressing bought in a regular American grocery store. It does have the good stuff in it, like apple cider vinegar and extra virgin olive oil and all that, but still, that was pretty surprising to pay that much for a bottle of salad dressing. It was really emblematic of the high inflation that we've had for a few years. CPI inflation has now come down to about 3%. It exceeded 9% in June of 2022. That's where it peaked. So I think a lot of people understand why we have inflation to deal with the health crisis We had the $2.2 trillion CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program. And really in America, we now have this culture of whenever there's a crisis, whether it's the 2008 global financial crisis or the health crisis that spouted in 2020, how do we deal with it? We don't tell the citizens, well, you need to be living austere and you should have been living austere these past few years so that you will have personal savings to tap into. People almost aren't incentivized to have personal savings anymore. You probably heard the stat that most Americans can't meet a $600 emergency. Why not? Why don't they? They've kind of been trained not to because the government just paves over problems by printing more dollars. Whether you agree with the CARES Act or not, it's not a politically partisan thing. That's not it. This stuff happens under any administration. They just print things over and pave the world over with more dollars in order to make problems go away. And there is actual political expediency to that because no president or congressperson wants to say that, oh, well, you just need to live austere and start eating beans and rice and get some savings build up. No way. They're not going to get reelected back into office. Both sides of the aisle do it. So the easiest thing to do is just print more dollars. What happens when the $2.2 trillion CARES Act comes out? You just got diluted. That's why the $20 bill in your wallet right now was worth more last night when you went to bed, and that $20 bill will be worth less tomorrow. So there's a political expediency here. Americans don't want to live in an austere way. All right, so what does this have to do with real estate investing? You can really take advantage of inflation. In a weird way, I'm almost like an inflation cheerleader. Yes. Okay. This inflation is not good for the average person, but I position myself as a real estate investor buying an income property with loans. Yes, I still get loans despite higher interest rates. I'm actually benefiting from this inflation three ways at the same time. I've coined the term, this is the real estate inflation triple crown. Asset price inflation, debt debasement, and cash flow enhancement are the three legs of the inflation triple crown. So let me just give you an example so you can understand this. If you make a $200K down payment on $1 million apartment building, say we've got 10% inflation, it might not be in a year, but just 10% inflation over a couple years. Your $1 million building just went up to $1.1 million in value. And maybe you're thinking, all right, so what? I mean, isn't that just an inflation hedge? How am I any better off? Aren't I right back where I started? If I now have 10% more dollars, but each one's worth 10% less? Actually, the answer is no, because you got a loan. You only made a $200K down payment. So your building value went up $100K. So did your equity. Your equity went from $200K to $300K. You've got a 50% return there because you're borrowing. You're getting the benefit of borrowing money. Secondly, when we look at your debt side, you borrowed $800K for this building. A lot of people don't realize this. This is the second leg of the inflation triple crown, debt debasement. If you borrow $800K and you've got 10% inflation, you only owe the bank back $720K in inflation adjusted dollars. See, the bank doesn't ask to be repaid in inflation adjusted dollars, just nominal dollars. And maybe you're wondering, well, what about the interest? Oh, the tenant pays all the interest for you. So an $800K loan with 10% inflation over time, you only owe the bank back $720K. It's only going to have the weight of $720K because wages are higher, rather, salaries are higher, prices are higher, rents are higher. And then thirdly, your cash flow in an inflationary environment actually goes up faster than inflation because you've got a loan on a property. And that's because your principal and interest payment stays fixed. As long as your principal and interest payment stays fixed, inflation can't touch it. So this is why cash flow outpaces the rate of inflation. So inflation is good for the leveraged real estate investor. And to bring it full circle, getting back to the dressing, that's why in a weird way, paying $8.79 for this seems like, it's an awful lot, but actually it's confirmation that I'm a profiteer because I've borrowed dollars for an asset that actually benefits from inflation. And it is kind of too bad for the poor person. A poor person, they can't really put assets in their portfolio and they're not going to be able to buy something like this. So you can decide, what side of this you want to get in on. So help use inflation to benefit your portfolio?
I think a lot of people don't make that connection. I think that as investors, and when they hear that you're in multifamily, and I've been in the locker room and hearing women say, I just got kicked out of my apartment because they raised the rents $500. Now, for people who are paying the rents, that could be difficult. But as an investor, kind of walk us through maybe some of that negative concern of apartment owners, from the public side, but from an investor side, it is certainly positive. How do you have that conversation? How do you describe that? Does that make sense?
Do you mean as far as almost like from a public relations standpoint?
Yes,
You're cheap.
because yeah, I was going to say, because when people say I'm a syndicator or I am in buying investment, I invest in apartments, and people say, oh, my friend just got hers raised, people look down on us, and it's really unfortunate. So how do you have those conversations with investors or people that you're introducing what you do?
Yeah, I can approach that from a few different angles. I gave the example of a $1 million apartment building. To most people, that seems like an unspeakable luxury, and perhaps only a wealthy person could own something like that.
Mhm.
But when you leverage your dollars, I mean, like the 200K down payment for that $1 million building, you probably got that from equity growth through a 1031 exchange in another property where you made a small down payment. So leverage really amplifies your wealth faster than compound interest. So you sure don't have to be born with a silver spoon to own a $1 million apartment building. I don't think many tenants are going to understand what I just said right there. So I don't think that's the best approach with tenants. That's just me speaking to you. If you're new to real estate investing and a $1 million building just seems untouchable, it's really not that untouchable or that far away. With
Good, very
tenants,
good point on that.
yeah,
Very good point. Yeah.
okay. Well, back when I was my own landlord on that fourplex building before I had professional management, one thing I learned is most tenants don't realize that I have a mortgage on the property. They
Mhm.
don't know that. I found a subtle way to tenants. Again, this is back in the face-to-face days, knock on the door, collect the rent. I found a subtle way to say, like, yeah, I do have a mortgage to pay every month. So yeah, I'm really hoping, I can't have your payment be late, because they don't know that. They don't understand that.
Very good point.
And that makes you seem like a more relatable person. You've got this big debt load of 500K debt to pay off. They don't understand that. But really today, professionally, where I'm a layer removed and I have a property manager between the tenants and really the most professional way to do it is just an unemotional sort of statement, just to say that your expenses have gone up. I found
True.
that best. Your property taxes have hiked up 6% year over year. Your property insurance, which is becoming a real problem in places, has maybe hiked up 80% year over year. If you're in a place like California or Louisiana or Florida, I've had astounding increases. So really the unemotional thing to do is to talk about how your expenses have increased. It's the truth. It matters. And a tenant can understand that.
Absolutely. Really great ideas there. Okay. I'm on the debt side. Interest rates have gone up considerably, as I mentioned earlier. You talked about fixed rate loans, right? And that's what we're seeing the shift go from this bridge lending environment to all the fixed, and why we're looking at that. Tell me more about your thoughts on interest rates, where we're going. What are do you think that the market is going to continue to increase? Where do you sit on interest rates?
I don't make mortgage rate predictions because I found it's a fantastic way to be wrong.
Yeah,
um, I do make Get Rich Education's annual home price appreciation forecast each year in December before the next year begins, and I've had really good success there. By the way, back in December of 2022, I said it would be 0% appreciation for 2023, not a decline, not an increase. We're just talking about single family home values here on that one. Maybe if you're new here, you don't understand, or it might seem inconceivable to you, that even though mortgage rates have almost tripled from where they bottomed out nearly 3 years ago,
Yeah.
mortgage rates are just historically average. For a single family home, they peaked at over 18% in October of 1981, and they're still less than half of that. So Freddie Mac will tell you that the long-term 30-year fixed rate owner-occupied rate average is about 7.5%. So yeah, maybe they're even a touch low, a touch below average. One thing that you can do with the direction of mortgage rates to help you forecast where other things in the economy are moving, including the direction of real estate, is sort of divorcing this notion of thinking that mortgage interest rates have something to do with property prices. And we're talking specifically about the 1 to 4 unit space here, okay? I don't have any of those stories of multifamily commercial loans where I got variable rate debt and I did not buy a rate cap, which is making a lot of syndicators blow up. I don't have that story. My sad story is the market story of Anchorage that I got out of, that I told you about. Here's the thing that's really inconceivable to some people. When mortgage rates rise, expect home prices to do what?
Well, most
You
of the
thought I was
time
going
we
to say
think they
fall.
go
It's
down.
rise. It's rise. When mortgage rates rise, expect home prices to rise. You actually heard me correctly on that one. And this seems unfathomable to a lot of people. When I share this with a PhD economist that I have on my show, often they understand that makes sense to them, but this often blows away real estate people. Well, how could that be true? Doesn't anyone know that when rates rise, I mean, that makes payments go up, and people actually buy homes more based on a payment than a price, so affordability comes down. So of course prices come down. Well, when's the last time when mortgage rates rose, home prices rose? How about right now? What's going on right now? Late 2021, it happened. All of 2022, it happened. And in 2023, it happened. In late 2022, some West Coast markets had a little dip in prices. And I have an image to support what I'm saying, that when mortgage rates rise, home prices rise. Do you want to share that, Julie, or shall I?
Oh, yeah, I can share that for you. Hang
Yeah,
on
share
just a
that.
second.
And as Julie cues that up, let me tell you what she's going to show you here. I supplied her with this yesterday. These are nominal house prices when mortgage rates rise. Okay, so what you're seeing along the bottom is the number of months. On the left there on the y-axis, that's the change in prices, and those lines, those 7 colored lines, denote the change in prices. Okay, so mortgage rates have increased 1% or more 7 times in the last 30 years. You're looking at all 7, and you're looking at what home prices did each of those 7 times. They rose every single time. But most people think that when mortgage rates rise, home prices fall. It's paradoxical. It's counterintuitive. These are the facts. And I think it's easy to have a hunch that when rates rise, prices fall. But like I often say, I take history over hunches. When I try to predict what might happen next, I look at history first. And this is some amazing history. 7 of the last 7. Notice that some of these price gains are rather small, though, and this is nominal house prices. Like it says at the top, nominal means in name only, so it's not adjusted for inflation. So yeah, expect to kind of see a small rise in a rising mortgage rate environment. All right, well, how can that be? Doesn't that seem like the most improbable thing ever? This is one of those things where I was telling you earlier that you're going to hear things that you didn't expect to hear today, like stop looking at properties. And when rates rise, prices rise. How can that possibly be? Well, first of all, there are some lag effects in the economy. It takes time for things to catch up and for cycles to mature. But this can't be completely explained with lag effects, because we need to understand what's happening in the economy when the Fed's raising rates. Usually the Fed's saying the economy's hot and it has to cool off. We have high employment. We have good GDP growth. We have inflationary factors. And this means things like what's emblematic right now. We actually have more open job positions than we even have workers to fill them. Well, that's a recipe for wage price growth, because now employers are trying to entice workers away with higher wages. So the economy is strong when rates are rising, and the Fed is saying that we need to cool it down. So I just said that employment is probably going to be pretty high when rates are rising, the economy is doing well. And when people are employed and they feel good about their wage and about their job options, if they lose their job, what do they tend to do? Buy a home. They want to buy a home. So really the lesson here is mortgage rates matter when it comes to house prices, but the more important factor is it the right time for you in your life to buy a house? And a lot of that just comes down to job security and individual prosperity, which tend to be better when rates are on the rise. Now, if we have a recession, my gosh, I almost get tired of talking about a recession. People continue to predict this recession that's constantly around the corner. What happens during a recession? Rates tend to fall, especially in the mid and late stages of a recession, because oppositely, the Fed is saying, we need to cut rates. The economy needs help. If we cut rates, oh, that'll entice people to want to get a loan to expand their business and keep the economy going. And we need to cut rates because unemployment has ticked up now. So take history over hunches. When mortgage rates rise, expect home prices to typically rise as well. Completely paradoxical to what most people think. But if you think a recession's coming, this is how you can help forecast the future. If you think a recession is coming, expect rates to fall then.
Okay, I know I'm off topic, but you had I follow you obviously, and you talked about 100% certainty of a housing crash.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Okay. There is a 100% certainty of a housing price crash in this era. Again, I'm talking about something that you wouldn't expect to hear, right?
Yeah.
I'm telling you what you would have expected to hear. There would be no reason for you to show up. How could there be a 100% certainty of anything that I'm even going to wake up tomorrow? No one has complete clairvoyance. How could you say there's going to be a 100% chance of a housing crash? That's because we already had it. Did you miss it? It
Oh,
occurred. It occurred in the spring of 2020. And I don't have the chart for that because I didn't know I was going to be asked about it,
yeah.
but I'm glad you asked, Julie, because people wonder, why do you say there's a 100% certainty of a housing crash? The housing crash that occurred in the spring of 2020, more than 3 years ago, was a housing supply crash.
Oh, yeah.
Giant crash in the supply of available homes. And maybe you're thinking I'm just trying to use sensationalization or semantics or something like that. No, I posit that a supply crash is a bigger deal than a price crash. A supply crash helps hedge against a price crash. That's what's happening lately, even among higher mortgage rates. You don't have as many bidders on homes as you did a couple of years ago, but with this huge millennial cohort that's in prime home buying years, that still keeps a few bidders on the very few available homes that there are. Depending on what numbers you want to look at, we've had about a 60% supply crash from back when we had a normal amount of American housing supply in 2017 or 2018. So the crash occurred. It is clearly a bigger deal than a price crash. Because come on, I mean, this is kind of sad, but a supply crash in housing, we're anywhere between 1.5 and 5 million housing units undersupplied, depending on the source you look at. That's a big deal. I mean, that might be why you see more homeless people in your town. It's really sad. So yes, the housing crash is 100% certain because it already occurred. It's worse than a price crash. It's a supply crash, and the supply crash hedges against the price crash. Really kind of a sad thing. Here we are, the most powerful nation in the world by a lot of measures, with the strongest military and biggest economy and biggest brand, and yet we have a hard time housing our own people.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm in California, so I see a lot of it.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
In Anchorage, too. In Anchorage, the homeless are quite
Yeah.
visible and their ranks are
Isn't
growing. And
that
it's a really
interesting?
difficult place to be homeless if you think about Anchorage winters.
I would think so. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, you've given us so much information. Do we have time to go over real estate pays 5 ways? Would it be, should we should we go over that one?
I have an idea. Yes, maybe
Yeah.
it's best for me to go over that quickly, but I have a free resource I can offer your group.
Yeah.
a video series, Real Estate Pays 5 Ways, about a 12-minute video on each of the 5 ways real estate pays. And when you add it up, you see how your returns get gargantuan with low risk. I coined the term and had trademarked that real estate pays 5 ways typically. In fact, I wouldn't expect to buy a property unless I thought I would get paid 5 distinct ways. And to give a little context, I think a lot of individual stock investors, they only plan to get paid one way. It's a game of buy low and sell high. Maybe a stock investor gets paid a second way if they have a dividend paying stock. That would be a separate, distinct profit source. But in real estate, the 5 ways are: the first is appreciation, something that over the long term we can typically count on. It's leveraged appreciation. When you take a loan, it really amplifies your wealth building. The second of 5 ways is cash flow, when your rent income exceeds the mortgage and all the operating expenses. The third way is an ROA, a return on amortization. Okay, we're adding up these 5 to get to a total ROI, a total return on investment. And the third one is an ROA, a return on amortization. And this is the principal pay down of your rental property. And maybe if you're a primary residence homeowner, you're thinking, oh, well, I'm already used to this. I see that every month when I make my payments, some goes toward principal, some goes toward interest. Like, I already have that benefit in my own home. Actually, you don't, because you had to work for both your principal and interest payment that you make each month. But in a rental, that principal pay down actually came from your tenant's pocket. So that's the third of 5 ways, that return on amortization. And then the fourth of 5 ways you're paid are the tax benefits, very generous tax benefits, where you can legally defer capital gains tax for the rest of your life with that erstwhile 1031 exchange. Presidents have threatened to take away the 1031 exchange, but it's been around for over 100 years. I don't see the 1031 going away anytime soon. There's something called tax depreciation, which means part of your rent income is sheltered from taxation. On your rent income, you also don't have to pay self-employment tax or Social Security tax. You do with your W-2 job. You do need to pay those 2 tax types. So the fourth is that very outrageously generous tax benefit. And then the fifth and final way is the inflation profiting benefit. And that's what you get on the long-term fixed interest rate debt. I described that a little bit when I was talking about the inflation triple crown, where if you've got $1 million in total mortgage debt, that gets easier to pay back. Of course, the tenant pays it down a little bit for you, but inflation makes it easier to pay back because the bank doesn't ask to be repaid in inflation-adjusted dollars. So those are the 5 simultaneous ways real estate pays: appreciation, cash flow, a return on amortization, tax benefits, and fifthly, that inflation profiting benefit that's probably the least understood of the 5, I'd say, Julie.
I would tell you that that is key information that you
Yeah.
just shared with us for a lot of people that are capital raising, that are trying. Jill, this is information that you want to be writing down or re-listen to this, because when you're trying to find investors, if you share all of this information, they will get it. They want to get involved. If they become now a partner, an investor in that asset, they want to take advantage of it. I mean, great information, Keith. I mean, solid. I so appreciate that. Tell me that quick tip you said for my listeners here, that they can listen to that 12-minute video.
Oh, yeah. It's a total of 60-minute videos.
Oh, okay.
It's 5 videos. Each of the 5 videos are about 12 minutes each.
Okay.
One video, each video describes each of the 5 ways you're paid. And we cumulatively add up your total rate of return as we go through each of the 5 12-minute videos. It's integral to understanding where your returns from real estate actually come from, how they're generated. When you understand that, now you know how to optimize your ROI. Now you just understand why anyone would invest in real estate in the first place. I made that video course completely free. I don't try to upsell you to some other course on there. There's no annoying stuff like that or ads on there. You can get it free at getricheducation.com/course is where you can get the free Real Estate Pays 5 Ways video course. Again, at getricheducation.com/course, truly free.
Okay, I'm putting that in the chat so everybody has that. GetRichEducation.com/course.
That'll help a lot of
So
people. Yeah.
yeah, that'll help. Wonderful, wonderful information. Keith, how do people get a hold of you? How do they find you? How do they listen to you? What's the best way?
Most people listen to me on the Get Rich Education audio podcast. Our YouTube channel's not as popular. I don't know if the crowd's trying to say that my voice is better than my face. So we want to listen to your voice, Keith. But yeah, we don't know about your face over there on YouTube. I think it's because we didn't start taking YouTube seriously until later. But yeah, it's the Get Rich Education podcast and the Get Rich Education YouTube channel. I've got some interesting YouTube videos over there now, including like Gavin Newsom's policies in
I
California and
saw
what that
that.
has to do with real estate and some other things over there at Get Rich Education YouTube. And then if you want to get to see the personal side of me, you can always hit me up on Instagram on the personal side. My handle's really easy to remember. It's just my name at Keith Weinhold, no spaces or dashes or anything like that. And I'll give you a follow back. But yeah, you'll see a very different side of me than talking about arbitrage and leverage and inflation over there.
I think you should really do a training videos. I think you are just so, you guys check him out. I mean, he is his exercising. Where you just come up with this, all of this workout stuff, or do you have a trainer?
I do have a group trainer, not a personal
Oh,
trainer. I do
yeah.
get ideas from other like Instagram fitness
Oh,
influencers. So I don't, I wish I could come up with some originality credit on some of those moves.
it's,
I
I wish
can't.
I could keep up with you. All right, let's open it up. Again, a live conversation with our
Yeah,
industry expert, Keith Weinhold, who has a question. We've covered a ton here.
covered a lot there.
And you're going to have to go back and listen to the video and then probably have to ask Keith to review that information. But Candace, what do we got?
Hey, thank you so much for your video, and Sean for popping that into the chat. My question is, it's the housing crisis. There's always a crisis. We like to blame things on certain things, but doesn't it just seem like the whole effect, the cause of all of these different crises is just simply the impact of the dollar globally with inflation, and that these are side effects that happen when the
Yeah.
power of the dollar is lessened. So it's not one thing that creates this. You could just comment on that, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, it's sort of a race to the bottom. When we owe China trillions, we have an incentive to debase our dollar. It gets easier for us to pay back our debtors like China. So yeah, everyone that owes debt to someone else kind of has this race to the bottom and every incentive to want to go ahead and create more currency because that makes it easier for everyone else to pay back their debts. So really what we can do then, Candace, is we're kind of taking a page out of the Fed's book. If we can't beat them, join them. Let's get a lot of debt ourselves where the payments are outsourced to tenants, and then inflation debases that debt for us. It's really, if you can't beat them, join them strategy. Central banks and the Fed are more powerful than me, so let's just align my strategy with what they're doing.
Interesting. Sean, what do you got?
Hey Keith, thanks for all of that info. I'm going to have to go home here in a minute and let my head explode. Just a lot of great info. You know, you commented on the fact that, you know, the debt, and I had never thought about it the way you put it on the, you know, letting, you know, that as a stream of income, you know, really, I mean, as a one of the ways you get paid. And I'm going, yeah, that was just mind blowing. But one of the things I love to say about debt is that, you know, debt is amazing, but you got to remember it's like a power tool. If you don't use it the right way, you might lose a limb. And so what are your thoughts on how much leverage is too much? Where's a good sweet spot?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you bring that up because really I've mostly talked about the positive benefits of leverage, Sean. Just like leverage can amplify gains, yeah, to your point, I think what you're saying is it can also amplify losses. And that's why really I go back to the market is more important than the property framework. The definition of being over leveraged, to your question, is when you cannot service your debt payments anymore. Rents are really resilient. Even during the 2008 global financial crisis, there was only an attrition of about 4% in rents. So it's about being in a diverse market and buying where your rent income meets or exceeds all your expenses. I don't like to buy where my rent income is 10% less than all my expenses and just hope rents will catch up to it sometime. Because what if they don't? What if that market turns and now the property price is going down and my rents aren't appreciating and I'm already underwater? I'm probably in real trouble. So again, the definition of over leverage is when you cannot service your debt payments, and strategies for staying out of it are being attentive to the market, knowing that the market is more important than the property, and not buying based on hope, buying on the numbers today with income meeting or exceeding expenses. Great question.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And yeah, hope is definitely not a strategy.
Yeah, that's true. Matt, what's
Hi.
your question?
So thanks, Julie. Thanks, Keith. My first income property was also a fourplex,
Oh, cool.
and I wish I still held on to it. It would be paid off by now. But my question has to do with return on amortization, which is a phrase you used.
Yeah.
As your tenants pay down your mortgage, you get more value. So how's that different than return on equity? Is it similar? How would you compare those two terms?
Yeah. I think of return on equity as your annual cash flow divided by the amount of equity that you have in the property. That's your ROE, or your return on equity. Your return on amortization is how much principal your tenants pay down for you each year divided by your equity. And return on amortizations have been under attack now. Return on amortizations have gone down for new property purchases these past couple of years. That is one negative consequence of higher mortgage rates, because less of your tenants' payment for your mortgage is going toward principal and more of it is going toward interest. But yeah, those are how I would do the two calculations. And that's why the ROA attrition has been occurring for the last 2 years.
Cool, thanks.
You know, I would say in this market, we really are looking for return of capital. As opposed to return on capital. So many of investors are in the bridge lending, and so difficult, such a challenging environment right now. So, all right, any other questions? Anybody want to, again, live conversation with an industry expert. This is your opportunity. Get with Keith Weinhold. Come on, Paula, you always have a question. What do you
Great
got? Anything
so
tonight?
I think that Keith did a great job in going through all of the issues that we're going through right now. I would like to ask Keith, do you have any ear to the ground on liquidity and what's going on? Because I see a lot of people calling and saying, "Hey, we thought we could raise the money, but we closed in less than 30 days and we can't raise it. We need help. Would you like to partner?" And so I'm just trying to see if you see that and where you think that's headed.
Great question.
Yeah, because I think people are great question, because I think people kind of get bathed in this media bath today of, affordability is just awful. And it is. It has gotten a lot worse. It's really the worst for the first-time home buyer. It's really bad for the flipper with low supply in today's environment. But it can be good for the investor if your debt structure is right, when you're paid 5 ways and supply is so low that if you have clean, safe, affordable, functional units, it's going to be occupied. Does that help somewhat?
Yes, it does. And I also think that from talking to people that cannot afford these apartments or increases, that they're just taking a step down. They're either partnering with somebody else for roommates, or they're going to RVs and mobile parks. And I think we're going to have a crisis in that, because some of the people just can't afford that. And so we're headed for some crazy times.
That is such a smart comment, Paula. You bring up a really astute point. A lot of people think of markets as being static. Say wages are going up 5%. How in the heck could you raise the rent then 10% or 20%? It's more difficult to get those rent increases now, but we just came off an era of exceptionally high rent increases. it's that sometimes renters step down a class. They move from an
Mhm.
A class property to a B class, or a B class to a C class.
Mm.
So the person that's paying your higher rent, your 20% higher rent now than what it was 2 years ago, they might have stepped down a class. So markets aren't static. That's a great point. Yes, many step down a class,
Yeah.
Paula.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and I also see one more thing that in Austin, you know, we've always had these increases and increases since 2008.
Mm.
And when COVID hit, yeah, there was a temporary bump down, but then you know, after a couple months, it just started going up, 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 and you know, there was a demand for housing because other people came from other states and poured into Texas.
Sure.
And so it created, I guess, an artificial demand for property that raised our property taxes because we don't have a state tax in Texas. So, you know, now we're trying to give some of the money back, and it's kind of, we're still not catching up with the true value of what the properties are versus how much they're taxed. And the taxes are still so high, we contest them, but they haven't gotten down to where they need to be. So when we're trying to talk about looking at property for multifamily, two of the biggest issues I see are taxes and insurance.
Yeah.
Insurance is just crazy. And so when you put
Absolutely.
that into underwriting, it's really difficult to make things pencil out easily. You have to be creative with your debt and then kind of like a crystal ball to see, hey, are they going to stay the same? Are they going to go down? Can you take that chance and do that variable rate today, thinking they'll go down tomorrow? I mean, what's the plan and what's the backup to the plan? So
Absolutely. Any follow up on that, Keith? Any thoughts?
Yeah, and this is emblematic of the point to where this market is the worst for first-time home buyers. It's not much better for second-time home buyers or move-up home buyers. Because to your point about these increasing expenses, higher property insurance rates, and rather higher property taxes and higher property insurance premiums, they can't go like raise the rent on someone. Okay. When we have income property, we're landlords, maybe we can raise the rent in order to compensate for those expenses. But if you're a homeowner, you might be at the mercy of your employer to get a raise. So you're in a more precarious position. So this is, we're just talking about why affordability is so bad. It's obviously more than just mortgage rates. Right now, the homeownership rate in the United States is about 66%. With affordability being so poor, I would expect the homeownership rate to fall to about 64%, maybe by 2025, to fall perhaps 2%, more or less, something like that. With every 1% decrease in the homeownership rate, there are 1 million more renters. So we can expect to see more renters. So as property investors, we can kind of play both sides of this poor affordability. It moves people out of the buyer pool and puts them into the renter pool. And I hope that translates to more rent increases.
I love it. Absolutely support all of that. All right, last one. Andy McMullen, what do you got?
Keith, yeah, thank you for doing this. Appreciate it. So I'm curious, after I read your book, I would recommend it to everybody. I think it's one of the best real estate books out there as far as teaching investors how to think about real estate. But most authors I talk to would say they would love to take something back, or they'd love to make an addition to the book that they wrote, even if it was well revered. And I'm curious, in reading that book, it was certainly a much more aggressive real estate market, and we probably had 10 years. So what kind of adjustments would you have made if you were to write that today?
I probably would have written more about the emphasis of fixed rate debt for apartment building owners. I was not advocating variable rate debt in that book, but we hit an unprecedented environment. Of course, interest rates and mortgage rates have been this high before. I discussed that earlier, but we've never seen them climb a cliff where they've doubled or almost tripled in just 2 years. So yeah, I probably would have written more to that point if I could update the book. Great question. And thanks for reading the book. It's a really easy read. Not only is it just 84 pages, it's 84 small pages. I don't want a 400-page book. I know how I feel when I see a 400-page book to read. It seems daunting. So thanks for that, Andy.
Sean, once again, can you put this in the chat? We've, again, international best-selling book by Keith Weinhold, 7 Money Myths that are killing your wealth potential. Everybody should get that. It starts there if you're new to this or you're capital raising and you don't know how to communicate with other investors. You got to find your voice. Keith really breaks it down really well and in a really easy way to understand it. Keith, this has been phenomenal. I don't want to wait another 2 years to have you on. It has been a phenomenal night. I really appreciate your time. We want to support you. Everybody make sure that you connect with Keith on your LinkedIn or your Facebook or his Instagram, and listen to the podcast. It is Get Rich Education. He is spectacular. So thank you again, Keith. I appreciate it.